Right, this little film is about the Jeep Cherokee, the XJ series, the square one, the brick. And it's the Mark 1, in fact the one that really is square, before they kind of ruined the shape with the facelift. The 4-litre straight 6, it's the one that replaced the Wagoneer shape and ran all the way through to about 2001. But this is the Mark 1, the first of the breed, so basically it ran from 1984 to about 1996, and this is a 96, so the last of the old ones. And everything about this is pretty much unchanged from 1984. All the switches and the controls, they're fabulous analog rocker switches, push buttons, everything on it is very tactile and clunky and chunky. But this really is one of my favourite cars. This is actually the third one of these that I have had, and I think I've probably done more miles behind the wheel of one of these cars than any other car. So why do I like these cars so much? I mean, you know, it's not the fastest car you can buy, it's not the biggest estate, it is a fairly useful wagon, but it's, you know, it doesn't absolutely, you know, it's not as big as an old 1980s Volvo estate. Inside, it's not maybe as capable off-road as you know, there'll be things you can do in a Toyota Land Cruiser that are every bit as potent as this, and there will be sports cars you'll be every bit as fast as this. But it's a kind of combination of all of those things. It really is the car for every occasion. So in terms of actual power output, it's not the most powerful engine. American engines often aren't. So it's a big old engine, 4-litre, straight 6, actually dates back to 1968. It was in the AMC Rambler, and it's pretty much unchanged all the way through. It was a big old brutish cast iron, heavy straight 6 up front. And while the actual stats for this engine aren't going to set the world on fire, the actual feeling when you put your foot down, the response, it gives you a real thrust in the back, but also the sound is out of this world. Gives you that Millennium Falcon thing, it really does. Here we are, the front lifts up, the back digs in, and the scenery just starts hurtling past, and the fuel gauge starts going down, and the fuel warning light comes on. Really is the reason I'm getting rid of this car, because I really did put 20 quid in yesterday, 20 quid in the day before, and just another 30 quid now. Right, well, let's have a look at where all the petrol goes. So this is the engine, 4 litres, straight 6, very big. So it's actually crammed into quite a small hole in this car. And actually that's one of the other issues. These do overheat sometimes. They eat through radiators. This car is on its second radiator, and my first Cherokee went through 4 radiators in the time I had it. It's just because there's nowhere for the heat to go. And as I said before, the actual BHP for the size of the engine is not actually enormous, so a lot of that does turn into noise and heat, I guess. But you can see it's a totally conventional layout. It's cast iron, it's an old AMC engine, dates back to 1968. And it's got just a conventional American style transmission behind, in line essentially under the bonnet, except for the various bits and pieces added to it later. It's really a 1970s layout machine. So let's just take a look at the rest of the car. So let's have a little look inside. So you've got a kind of nice, fairly traditional old-fashioned interior, and I particularly love all these switches here on the door panel, kind of the lovely rocker switches and the controls for the window. And here's the ignition key unit, which I do particularly like. I'll just shut the door so the buzzer doesn't go off. Classic American style ignition unit, holds the key, which is rather nice. But a great thing about all the controls in here, they're very kind of tactile here. You've got the window controls and the door switches, everything's on sort of rocker switches. So as well as being comfortable and very robust, it's also very kind of intuitive, where every single control is, you can kind of feel your way around. You could do it all with your eyes closed. You'll never be looking for where the hazard warning lights are. If there's a pilot coming, you just know exactly where it is. There's not a single control in here that you couldn't actually find without looking. No, I'd say it suits the car really well, and it's totally robust. So if you do put planks of wood in and they rest on the dashboard, it absolutely takes all that stuff. No, overall makes for a really good driving experience. Let's just have a look at the difference between the Mark 1, this one, and the Mark 2 XJ. I mean, you can see it's basically the same car. You know, I like them both. But in terms of the kind of purity of design, this has got the beautiful, crisp, razor edge. It's just so sharp the way the lines are. This is essentially a compromise. It's kind of this design, but with all the edges rounded off to make it a little bit more appealing for a kind of more modern. So it's not a new car, but it's not the original old car either. And it just doesn't work for me quite so well. The kind of the detailing on the bumpers and the lights. This is just, oh, you know, for an American car as well, it's so stylish. I mean, you can see it really still is the same thing. The bonnet panel's the same, the scuttle panel, the roof, everything about it. But just all these edges here have been rounded off, and I just think it's less satisfactory. It's not, it just doesn't work for me. But I think where the design really goes wrong for me is the back end. So they've smoothed out this tailgate and put this kind of curve on here, curved around the lights. Whereas on here, you've got this razor edge running down. But where that really doesn't work is the styling line that goes down the body. It just kind of peters out. Whereas on the old one, you can see it follows across the back. And the lights on the old one, they're absolutely square boxes. They're like a Rubik's Cube. And this, well, what shape is that? It's just kind of nothing. And as I say, it's the worst of both worlds. It's not an entirely new design, but it's not the original design either. It's just a bit of a fudge. So out on the road, it is a sensational machine, and even though it doesn't hold the road and grip like a kind of BMW M3 or something, it does lurch and roll. That's all part of the fun. I mean, if you're in a real hurry in one of these, the combination of the noises it makes and the way it kind of really does push you forward. And it does hang on in the bends, but it leans and it lurches. It is such a kind of dramatic driving experience. You're left in no doubt at all that you are crossing country at speed. And then it tows. I mean, what a tow car. You just hook things on the back, put your foot down and go. I mean, a lot of the early Cherokees that are still around have actually been chopped up and turned into kind of dedicated off-roaders. The wheel arch has been chopped away, they've been jacked up, winches, all that kind of stuff. There we are, see, hardly moving, but brilliant. Sometimes you just put your foot down and look out the back and there's a big cloud of smoke. It goes through tyres at the bottom, but bloody hell, it's great. Where was I? Yeah, off-roading. So a lot of these have been cut down, turned into off-roaders, winches, jacked up kits, all that stuff, snorkels. That's fine, but I think it's a little bit of a shame because they are so smart looking as they come out of the factory. The styling is crisp and understated. For an American car, it's astonishingly sophisticated. But also, as they come from the factory, they're incredibly capable. It will go most places that are muddy, just as it is. And I think somehow it's more impressive to have a car that you can take anywhere and then will jet wash up and be respectable enough to take to a business meeting and give some business people a ride the next day. I mean, obviously it's great that some do get turned into off-roaders because these cars in full off-road trim can do astonishing things. I've seen them pull up almost vertical cliff faces. Amazing machines. But I still think that this car is at its best in factory trim as an all-round, fast, enjoyable, luxurious, presentable car that is just as happy towing a boat or moving half a ton of timber or taking, you know, some business colleagues to a meeting or going to a plowed field. It's just, you know, the car for every occasion. Great car to have if you lived in Saudi Arabia or America. Yeah, I've got a friend actually lives in Idaho, and he tells me that petrol out there is about £1 a gallon at the moment. But here, what is it? About $5.80 a gallon. 80% of that is tax. So in a sense, every time I put my foot down, I'm doing good work. So I'm building a library somewhere. Well, continuity geeks will obviously observe I'm not wearing the same clothes as I am in other parts of the film, and that is because the actual truth of the matter is that this film has actually been shot across 2 days. I didn't have time in the one day to do it, and I'm reasonably busy. It does actually take a lot of time putting on the bloody petrol in this car. I put 25 quid in yesterday and it's beyond empty. It's got a fuel warning light looking at me. That is outrageous. Now, I talked about off-road capability, and that's an obvious thing when you see a Jeep, a 4x4. You obviously think of you know, mud plugging, which is why so many of these have been cut down and made into dedicated off-roaders. But the other thing where the four-wheel drive comes into its own is snow, and actually in the snow, and that's when you still need an interior, you still need a heater. This car is epic. I do also think that in 10 years time or something, these will be much harder to get in decent original condition, certainly for any kind of sensible price. I think it will be like early Range Rovers. There was a period when you could pick them up for next to nothing. They're big cars. But these days, if you try and get a 1970, 71 two-door Range Rover in range, you're going to pay serious money. I mean, 10, 15 years, same will be true of these. Something else about these, they are incredibly tower happy. If there's even the slightest dew on the road, the back would just be all over the place, which is all part of the fun, to be honest. It's classic rear wheel drive, slippery handling. Now, something else that does really appeal to me about these cars is the history. It really is a proper Jeep. So this was built in the factory at Toledo, Ohio. It was actually the last model built in that plant. That's the same plant where the Willys Jeeps from World War II were built. They were actually demolishing that plant while the last batch of the Mark I XJs were going through. So basically when the last car rolled off the production line, the first part of the production line and the factory had already been demolished. So, you know, it was kind of the last of that first generation of Jeeps. And in terms of the history, the link going all the way back, this has got Dana axles, Dana 45s, which are an actual evolution of the very same axles that the World War II Willys Jeeps had, and they're kind of conceptually so close that an afternoon with an angle grinder you would be able to make those Willys Jeep axles fit on this car. So it really is a Jeep through and through. You couldn't do that with the modern latest, the Jeep Patriots or whatever. There's not a single part of a World War II Jeep that would fit onto one of those. You could probably hear once the speed gets up, there is actually quite a lot of wind noise in the car. It's not the best sealed ever. These do leak a fair bit. They always have. All three of the Jeeps I've had have all leaked under the dashboard, round the doors. It's just that they've never got right sealing them properly. But I must say, as part of the overall driving experience, that really is something I can overlook. How it goes is much more important than how well it holds up water. Now, if I'm going to drive an automatic, I do like a kind of American style, old-fashioned auto, with a big shifter with a button on it. And the transmission itself in this car is absolutely splendid. It's a big old American style 3-speed auto box with torque converter. And it's the kind of transmission that absolutely loves abuse. What I mean is you can pull it out of a driveway in reverse and then throw it into drive while it's still going backwards, and wheels spin away and it just will not complain or grumble or jerk or anything. You know, it's the kind of transmission that is built to withstand that kind of driving. It's as if it's designed by people who drive like that. It's a proper, robust, strong unit and well suited to be bolted to the back of that big cast iron 6-cylinder engine. It's also got an old school conventional separate transfer box with the prop shafts going forward and back, and on that you've got the separate lever down here for engaging high and low ratio, and so you've also got a high ratio four-wheel drive for on-road use with a central diff, and low ratio where it locks the diffs all up, and that's for when you're deep down in the mud, and you've got your two-wheel drive, obviously high ratio setting. The thing I love about that is that not only is it entirely mechanical, so there's very little to go wrong, and it will last and last and last, and even when it starts to fail, those kind of transmissions, they fail so slowly, not like your electronic kind of Tiptronic transmissions. Once they start to go wrong, they're an absolute nightmare, make the car horrible to drive instantly. But also this kind of transmission with a torque converter, it gives you that kind of lazy American driving experience, so it really suits the character of the car very well. For an auto, it does actually pick up speed incredibly well. It does accelerate up through the gears astonishingly well. Something else I like about this car is how all the extras work, the cruise control. So there we are, I set that, and then so that's now automatically going up through the gears. So you've just caught me doing some work on the car, and that's a great time to talk about also how great they are to work on. The way they're put together, everything's accessible, but even the quality of the fittings, these lovely machine screws and these nuts with the kind of integral washers, everything's bolted together with those so the spanners fit firmly. It definitely is a car which someone who built it intended people to be able to work on. It's a really crowded engine bay, big engine in a small hole, but everything's totally sensible and rational. I mean, the original Jeeps came from a kind of design concept that how easy it is to fix out in the field is just as important as what its performance is, and that's the same concept that carries through with this car. One thing that's got to be said about the Jeep as well is it's great for people who like analog cars. It's kind of modern enough not to be totally unreliable. It's not like driving some old car from the 60s or the 70s, which, to be frank, is going to throw up loads of problems, and I've done enough of that to know. But it's relatively modern. It's got hazard warning lights, it's got doors that shut properly, it's got disc brakes, it's even got ABS. But all of the controls and all of the switches is all entirely analog. There's no irritating flicking between different displays and telling you bits of useless information you don't want to know about what your average MPG is. To be frank, in this car you really don't want to know what your average MPG is. But that sense of just driving down the road with essential controls in front of you, the rev counter, the switches, the buttons, all of the controls are so tactile, so intuitive. Everything is where you want it to be as well. There is nothing on this car that you couldn't reach, with your eyes shut. There's no kind of fumbling around for, you know, where's the hazard warning light when you need it. So in that respect, it's an absolute joy to drive. It's good at overtaking people as well. You just never need to worry about whether you've got big run or anyone coming up behind you. Picks up speed so well. I mean, part of the thing with getting cross country fast, or certainly up and down motorways, is the road presence of the thing. I mean, I know it sounds a bit awful to say, but people do get out of the way. I mean, of all the cars I've had, this is the best car if you're trying to get down the motorway and there's some, you know, Charlie in the outside lane doing 45 miles an hour claiming that they're, I don't know, going as fast as a speed limit or whatever, and there's 2 empty lanes on their left. This is the best car I've ever had for getting those people out of the way. If you come up behind them, give them a little flash of the headlights, whoosh, they're gone. Now, I don't make a habit of doing that. I like to be polite when I'm out and about, but sometimes you are in a hurry. And if you've got a 3-lane road and it's empty and there's some numpty in the outside lane, well, it's not what you want, is it? Well, as you can see, it's a fearsome load lugger, and something I do really like about it is how it actually comes from the factory with a roof rack on it. I like a car that's straight from the box, you can move a whole load of crap with. That's not going anywhere. Brilliant. As I say, straight from the box, ready to move rubbish.
Here he comes.
The lock, let go of the handle. I don't have the handle, open the lock.
Shake up! Come on, move! Get out! Come on! Trusted your old mother, boy. Throw it in the 4-wheel drive and hold